Alexander Taylor Valdez. A single image sent through a phone app can travel across the world in seconds, connecting friends and sharing moments meant to be fleeting. But what happens when someone uses that same technology to broadcast something so disturbing that those who see it can never forget? In Fort Worth, Texas, a Snapchat message turned a group chat into a witness stand and forced friends to confront a reality no one should ever face. Alexander Taylor Valdez was 23 years old when his name became known across the nation. He lived in Fort Worth with his mother, 58-year-old Teresita Sason. To neighbors, they seemed like an ordinary family. Sason worked hard to provide for her son and maintained their home on Farmers Branch Street. There were no public signs of conflict, no warnings that anything was wrong. But on the early morning of April 18th, 2025, everything changed in ways that would leave an entire community searching for answers. Around 1:30 in the morning, an anonymous caller contacted Fort Worth police with a report that sent officers rushing to the scene. The caller explained they had received a photo in a Snapchat group chat showing a woman lying on the ground covered in something red, possibly blood. The caller provided an address on Farmers Branch Street, identifying the person who sent the image as the resident of that home. When officers arrived and announced themselves, the door opened to reveal a man holding a Bible. Blood covered his face, his neck, his chest, his torso, his hands, and his feet. He stepped out onto the front porch and sat down in a chair. His first words to the officers were ones they would never forget. He told them it was an exorcism. When asked if anyone else was inside the house, he responded calmly that there was a body in there. It was his mom. Officers entered the home and found Sason in the master bedroom with trauma to her face and upper body. She was pronounced deceased at the scene. Beside her was a dog, also no longer living. The room told a story of violence that had unfolded just hours earlier. Valdez was detained immediately and identified. As investigators began processing the scene, several of his friends arrived at the house. They told officers they were part of the Snapchat group chat and had received the image Valdez sent. One friend opened the message first and immediately warned the others not to look at it. That friend showed the photo to police, confirming it depicted Sason and the dog along with the scene inside the home. During a search of the residence, officers discovered a broken jewelry box with blood and human hair wedged into it. Authorities believe this was the object used in the attack. The Tarrant County Medical Examiner later confirmed Sason died from blunt force injuries to the head. Valdez was taken to the Fort Worth Homicide Office for questioning. When asked about what happened, he made statements that left investigators deeply troubled. He claimed he had been doing witchcraft to harm his mother. He described the incident as an exorcism, but when pressed for more details, he declined to answer further questions and requested an attorney. His silence marked the end of any explanation for why he had done what he did or what led him to that moment. The case raised questions about mental health, belief systems, and the role of technology in modern crimes. How does someone reach a point where they believe harming a family member is justified? What happens in the mind of a person who then chooses to share proof of their actions with friends? And why did he send that image, knowing it would be seen by people who cared about him? Neighbors who lived near the Valdez home told reporters they were shocked by what had happened. One woman mentioned her dogs woke her up that morning, and she came outside to find the street filled with police cars and friends of Valdez standing nearby. She described the entire situation as disturbing and said it was clear something was deeply wrong with him. Fort Worth police officers who spoke to the press echoed that sentiment, acknowledging the community would struggle to make sense of such a tragedy. Valdez was charged with 1 count of murder and booked into Tarrant County Jail. A judge set his bond at $750,000. As of the most recent reports, he remains in custody awaiting trial. The legal process will determine his fate. but the impact of his actions extends far beyond the courtroom. His friends, who received that Snapchat message, now carry the weight of what they saw. His mother's family mourns a woman whose life was taken by her own son, and the community grapples with the knowledge that such violence can happen anywhere, even in quiet neighborhoods where people think they know their neighbors. The story of Alexander Taylor Valdez is one of technology intersecting with tragedy. Snapchat was designed to connect people, to share experiences, and to build relationships. But in this case, it became a tool for broadcasting horror. It served as evidence in a criminal investigation and forced friends to become witnesses. For everyone touched by this case, the question remains: could anything have been done to prevent it? And how do we recognize when someone needs help before it's too late? Today, Teresita Sasson is remembered by those who knew her as a hard-working mother. Her son's actions took her life and left behind questions that may never be fully answered. The case continues to move through the legal system, and the world watches to see what consequences will follow. But no verdict will bring Sasson back or erase the image sent through Snapchat that night. Some moments, once shared, can never be undone. Chance Seneca. Digital connections promise companionship, but what happens when someone uses technology not to find love, but to hunt? In Lafayette, Louisiana, a dating app designed to bring people together became the weapon in a plan so dark it echoed one of history's most infamous serial killers. Chance Seneca turned the modern world of online dating into a trap, and his intentions went far beyond anything most could imagine. 18-year-old Holden White thought he was meeting someone for a date. The year was 2020, and like countless others his age, White used Grindr to connect with people in his community. On the evening of June 20th, he accepted what seemed like an ordinary invitation. Seneca, then 19 years old, picked White up and drove him to an isolated property on Maryview Farm Road. The house belonged to Seneca's father and was empty that night. What White didn't know was that every detail had been arranged with one purpose in mind. Once inside, Seneca pulled out a handgun. He told White to put on handcuffs, making a joke about doing things the easy way or the hard way. White complied, likely thinking it was part of some scenario he hadn't anticipated. But this wasn't a game. Seneca's plans had been forming for months, inspired by an obsession that consumed him. He wasn't interested in intimacy or connection. He was interested in control, dominance, and something far more sinister. What followed next defies easy description without crossing into territory that would be too intense for many viewers. Seneca attacked White with a level of determination that suggested this wasn't impulsive. He strangled him. He struck him over the head. He used a knife to cut White's wrists down to the bone, nearly severing his hands entirely. He stabbed him in the neck multiple times. All of this while White fought to remain conscious, repeating the words, "Stay calm," in his mind as his vision began to fade. When Seneca believed White was no longer alive, he placed him in a bathtub. The water ran cold and turned red. White lay there, unable to move, his body failing him. But something kept him tethered to this world. In those moments, facing what he thought was the end, White refused to give up. His will to survive became the only thing standing between him and the fate Seneca had planned. Then something unexpected happened. Seneca called 911. He reported what he had done, claiming he wanted to be committed to a mental institution. Police arrived at the property to find Seneca outside, waiting for them. Inside, they found White clinging to life. Emergency responders rushed him to the hospital, where he spent 3 days in a coma. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw breathing tubes, bandages, and faces he didn't recognize. He had survived, but the road ahead would be long and painful. The investigation revealed something that made the case even more disturbing. This wasn't Seneca's only attempt. Just 1 day earlier, on June 19th, he had used the same app to meet another man. That encounter didn't end in violence, but only because Seneca chose not to follow through. Authorities later discovered he had contacted a third individual as well. The pattern was clear. Seneca was hunting, and he had no intention of stopping. FBI agents began digging into Seneca's background and discovered years of obsession with Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Dahmer had targeted gay men between 1978 and 1991, taking 17 lives through methods that included dismemberment and other acts too disturbing to detail here. Seneca had studied Dahmer extensively through books, films, and internet searches. He had spent 7 to 8 months refining his own plan, modeling it after Dahmer's approach. He intended to keep parts of his victims as trophies, and had even considered consuming human remains, just as Dahmer had done. During his interrogation, Seneca admitted something chilling. He said he had homicidal urges and planned to continue targeting gay men until he was either caught or no longer alive himself. This wasn't about one moment of rage or a single tragic decision. This was a sustained effort to carry out a series of planned attacks against people simply because of who they were. Seneca was charged with multiple federal offenses, including kidnapping, hate crimes, and obstruction of justice. In September of 2022, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of kidnapping in exchange for other charges being dropped. On January 25, 2023, U.S. District Judge Robert Summerhays sentenced him to 45 years in federal prison. With credit for time already served, Seneca will spend over 4 decades behind bars. White, now 21, attended the sentencing hearing. He spoke directly to the judge about the lasting damage the attack had left on his body and mind. His hands lost feeling. His voice changed. Scars cover his skin. He experiences anxiety and struggles with trust. Yet he continues moving forward, refusing to let that night define him completely. He hopes his story will help others recognize danger and encourage anyone who has experienced trauma to seek support. Seneca's case stands as a reminder that technology, while connecting us in ways previous generations never experienced, can also be exploited by those with harmful intentions. The internet should be a space where everyone feels secure, regardless of their identity. What happened to Holden White was a hate crime, and it reflects prejudices that still exist today. But it also shows the resilience of those who refuse to be silenced by violence. White survived, and in doing so, he prevented others from becoming victims of a plan that might have continued indefinitely. Ali Abu Laban. Character voices can mask the truth. A well-timed impression, a perfectly delivered catchphrase, a persona crafted for millions of followers. These digital performances create distance between the actor and reality, allowing someone to become anyone they want to be for 15 seconds at a time. But what happens when the persona consumes the person? When the lines between performance and life dissolve so completely that neither the creator nor those watching can tell where one ends and the other begins? For Ali Abu Laban, the answer would emerge on October 21, 2021, when the curtain fell in the most permanent way possible. Ali Nasser Abu Laban met Anna Marie Cardenas in 2014 while they were both serving in the United States Air Force. They were stationed in Okinawa, Japan, thousands of miles from home, young and full of possibilities. Anna had grown up in the Philippines before her family moved to the United States. She was described by those who knew her as gentle, patient, and forgiving. Ali came from a family with roots in Jordan and had grown up in Staten Island, New York. Their connection was immediate. Within months of meeting, they married and started building what appeared to be a life together. But cracks appeared early. Friends who knew Anna in Japan recalled witnessing Ali become physical with her as early as 2015. One childhood friend testified that Ali made everyone in the room uncomfortable with his behavior, describing him as both physical and verbal in his treatment of Anna. Yet Anna stayed. They moved to Virginia, where Ali was eventually discharged from the Air Force. The circumstances of his discharge were tied to an alleged incident involving a friend of Anna's, though details remained murky. By 2019, they had relocated again, this time to San Diego, California. Ali had dreams of making it in Los Angeles. Anna wanted to be closer to friends from her time overseas. And they had a daughter together, a 5-year-old girl who would become caught in the middle of what was unraveling around her. Around the same time they arrived in San Diego, Ali discovered TikTok. He created an account under the username Jin Kid and began posting comedy sketches and impressions. His specialty became mimicking Tony Montana from the film Scarface, complete with the accent and mannerisms that made the character iconic. He also impersonated the rapper Tekashi 6ix9ine and characters from the video game Skyrim. The content resonated. His videos racked up millions of views. His follower count climbed steadily until it reached nearly 1 million people. For Ali, Jin Kid wasn't just a username. It became an identity, an escape from being Ali Abulaban the person. Anna often helped with the videos, filming from behind the camera or occasionally appearing alongside him. To outsiders scrolling through TikTok, they looked like a couple building something together. But the reality was far different. Ali was jealous, controlling, and increasingly volatile. He regularly used substances, even going so far as to use them on camera during live streams. He would broadcast arguments with Anna, verbally mistreating her in front of thousands of viewers. Some followers thought it was an act. Others grew concerned. In the months leading up to October 2021, Ali posted troubling content about their relationship, accusing Anna of infidelity and berating her for refusing intimacy. The private struggles of their marriage were becoming public entertainment. Anna reached a breaking point. On October 18, 2021, she asked Ali to leave their apartment at the Spire San Diego, a luxury high-rise building in the East Village neighborhood. The 35th floor unit had been their home, but Anna wanted space. She was done. Ali checked into a hotel, but he wasn't ready to accept that the marriage was over. Just 3 days later, on October 21st, he returned to the apartment while Anna was away. Surveillance footage captured him entering the building around 9 in the morning. Once inside, he went through the residence, causing damage and leaving chaos in his wake. He threw a pumpkin and flowers onto the ground. Then he did something that would prove critical to what followed. He took his daughter's iPad, installed a listening application on it, plugged the device in, and hid it behind the bed in the primary bedroom. Later that same day, Anna returned to the apartment. She had asked a friend to pick up her daughter from school so she could clean. She also invited Rayburn Cardenas Barron to come over and help. Rayburn, who went by Ray, was 29 years old and had been a friend to Anna. Ali had long been jealous of Rayburn, reportedly because Rayburn had once made a comment about Ali being fortunate to have such a beautiful wife. When Ali listened to the audio from the hidden device and heard a man's voice in the apartment, something inside him broke. Surveillance cameras inside the Spire building documented what happened next. At approximately 2:50 in the afternoon, Ali was seen entering the parking garage and taking the elevator to the 35th floor. Security footage from a neighbor's camera captured the sound of the apartment door opening. 3 seconds later, gunfire erupted. Multiple shots rang out. Between the blasts, Anna's voice could be heard screaming. After the 6th shot, Ali's voice cut through the silence. Anna, Anna. He called her name several times. Moments later, he was seen in the hallway on his phone, speaking to his mother. He admitted to her what he had just done. Inside the apartment, Anna and Rayburn were both on the couch. Rayburn had been struck 3 times. Anna had been shot once in the head. Ali took a photograph of their bodies and sent it to his mother. He later testified that he didn't remember taking the picture. He called authorities himself, claiming he wanted to get them medical attention because he wasn't sure if they were gone. Then he left the building, picked up his 5-year-old daughter from school, and while driving with her in the car, told the child, "I hurt Mommy." Police arrested Ali shortly afterward during a traffic stop. When they took him into custody, he had already confessed to his mother over the phone. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Prosecutors had the surveillance footage showing him entering the building and sprinting down the hallway toward the apartment. They had audio recordings of the incident itself. They had the photograph he took. They had his confession. And they had a documented history of his controlling, violent behavior toward Anna throughout their relationship. Ali Abulaban was charged with 2 counts of first-degree offense, along with special circumstance allegations for committing multiple acts of violence. His trial began in May 2024. Over the course of nearly a month, jurors heard testimony from friends, family members, law enforcement officers, and crime scene investigators. They watched the videos Ali had posted online. They listened to the recordings from his phone. And they heard from Ali himself, who took the stand in his own defense. During his testimony, Ali admitted to what he had done, but framed it as a loss of control. "My gun was in my hand, and next thing, I'm shooting, and I can't stop," he told the jury. "I'm just shooting. It's like I'm watching it happen, like I'm in the passenger seat of my own body." He claimed he had been struggling with substance use and mental illness. He said he felt disrespected and hurt. He insisted he never planned or intended to take anyone's life. His defense attorney argued for a voluntary manslaughter conviction, suggesting that Ali had acted in the heat of passion after months of suspecting his wife was unfaithful. The prosecution presented a different narrative. Deputy District Attorney Taryn Brast told jurors that Ali was so possessive and controlling that if he could not have Anna, no one could. She argued that he had installed the listening device specifically to catch Anna with another man, that he had made a conscious choice to arm himself and return to the apartment, and that he had opportunities to turn back, but chose violence instead. This case was all about power and control until the very end, Brast said. On May 29, 2024, the jury returned with guilty verdicts on both counts of first-degree offense. Ali broke down in the courtroom, crying as the decision was read. The outcome meant he would face life in prison without the possibility of parole. His sentencing hearing took place on September 6, 2024. Before the judge imposed the sentence, family members of both victims addressed the court. Anna's sister screamed at Ali through tears, confronting him about the pain he had caused. "If I had known what my sister had been through with all that mistreatment, if I had known, I would have flown again to see her and to take her and Amira from you," she said, referring to Ali and Anna's daughter. Rayburn's family described him as a caring person, a loving little brother, and someone who went out of his way to help others. They said their lives had not been the same since losing him. Ali himself gave a 10-minute statement to the court, apologizing to both families and claiming he wished he could undo everything. To Rayburn's family, he said, "After seeing just how consistently you all showed up to this trial in support of him, I have no doubt in my mind that Ray was a good person. The world has truly suffered a great loss, and for that, I'm terribly sorry." He ended by saying that being sent to prison without hope of release felt like being sent to a place of eternal punishment. Judge Jeffrey Fraser was unmoved. He stated that he had serious reservations about Ali's remorse and called him a very selfish person. "The bottom line here is he will pass away in prison," Fraser said. "He will never be a free man. He will take his last breath there." The courtroom erupted in applause. Ali turned around, mockingly clapping along before muttering an expletive under his breath. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive terms of 25 years to life, without the possibility of parole. Ali Abulaban now sits in prison, having filed an appeal claiming his trial was unfair and that he should not have been convicted of first-degree offense because he did not plan what happened. He insists the charges should have been reduced. But for Anna's family, for Rayburn's family, and for the 5-year-old daughter who lost both her mother and her father in a single afternoon, appeals change nothing. The damage is done. The lives are gone. And the question remains, how did a man who made millions laugh on social media become someone capable of taking 2 lives in 3 seconds? Keon Williams. What does it mean to call someone a friend? In the digital age, we use that word loosely, adding people to our social circles with a simple tap. But friendship once meant something deeper. It meant trust, loyalty, and the unshakable belief that the person beside you would never wish you harm. On a quiet Tuesday evening in May of 2023, in the South London borough of Croydon, a 22-year-old father named Lucas Sutton learned that the word friend had become dangerously meaningless, and by the time he understood the truth, it was already too late. Lucas Sutton was an ordinary young man trying to navigate life in Croydon. He was a father, and though his life wasn't without its complications, those who knew him described him as someone who cared deeply about the people around him. In the weeks leading up to his passing, friends and family noticed a change in his behavior. He seemed withdrawn. He appeared anxious. He confided in those close to him that he believed he had upset certain people and feared for his safety. But when asked who he was afraid of, Lucas never gave a clear answer. Perhaps he didn't want to believe the danger could come from people he once trusted. Or perhaps he simply didn't know. On the evening of May 23rd, 2023, Lucas walked to a flat on Princess Road in Croydon. Waiting for him there were Keon Williams, then 19 years old, and Kai Nelson Palmer, who was just 17. Lucas had been friends with at least one of them. There was no indication that he suspected anything unusual about the meeting. After spending some time at the flat, the 3 of them decided to walk to a nearby shop to buy drinks. It seemed like a normal, unremarkable errand. Lucas had no reason to think otherwise. But as they walked back from the shop along Northbrook Road, something shifted. Without warning, Keon Williams produced a knife. In an instant, the casual evening turned into a nightmare. Williams attacked Lucas, catching him completely off guard. Lucas dropped the drinks he was carrying and ran. He fled down Mayo Road, desperate to escape, but Williams chased him, catching up and attacking him again. Lucas, now injured and terrified, staggered toward a nearby pub called the Pawson's Arms, bursting through the doors, seeking help. He collapsed inside. Paramedics arrived quickly and fought to save his life. But the injuries were too severe. Lucas Sutton passed away shortly after reaching the hospital. The investigation moved swiftly. Within days, Metropolitan Police arrested both Keon Williams and Kai Nelson Palmer. Detectives began piecing together what had happened and why. What they discovered was deeply disturbing. According to investigators, the attack wasn't spontaneous. It had been planned in advance. Evidence recovered from Nelson Palmer's phone revealed messages exchanged on Snapchat between the 2 attackers in the days leading up to the incident. The messages made their intentions clear. They had lured Lucas to that flat with the specific purpose of carrying out an attack. But what could possibly motivate 2 young men to plan something so terrible against someone they once called a friend? Detective Chief Inspector Brian Howie from the Metropolitan Police Specialist Crime Command explained the motive during the investigation. According to police, Lucas had been holding onto a firearm for someone. At some point, he attempted to dispose of it. In the minds of Williams and Nelson Palmer, this was an unforgivable betrayal. They believed Lucas had crossed them, and this perceived act of disloyalty became the justification for their plan. It was a petty grievance, that escalated into something irreversible. CCTV footage played a crucial role in identifying Williams as the attacker. Cameras captured him chasing Lucas down the street while wearing a distinctive balaclava. When police executed a search warrant at an address linked to Williams, they recovered a similar balaclava, connecting him directly to the scene. The evidence was overwhelming. In April of 2024, both men stood trial at London's Old Bailey Criminal Court. Kian Williams was found guilty on April 26th. Kai Nelson Palmer was found guilty 4 days later on April 30th. On August 14th, 2024, both men appeared before Southwark Crown Court for sentencing. The judge handed down life sentences for both. Williams was ordered to serve a minimum of 23 years before being eligible for parole. Nelson Palmer received a minimum term of 16 years. The convictions and sentences were initially subject to reporting restrictions, but were made public in April of 2025 after a third defendant, a 19-year-old man, was acquitted of involvement in the case. The family of Lucas Sutton released a statement following the sentencing. They spoke about the enormous void left in their lives by his passing. They acknowledged that Lucas wasn't perfect and that he had made mistakes, but they emphasized something far more important. He was theirs, he was loved, and nothing he could have done justified what happened to him. For Lucas's family, no sentence will ever bring him back or fill the emptiness his absence has created. The case of Kian Williams and Kai Nelson Palmer stands as a reminder of how technology can be used to facilitate harm. Snapchat, an app designed to connect people and share moments, became a tool for planning violence. The messages exchanged between the attackers revealed their intentions and helped prosecutors build their case. But those same messages also raise troubling questions. How do we recognize when someone we know is planning to harm another person? And what can be done to intervene before it's too late? Detective Chief Inspector Howie addressed this during his statement to the press. He emphasized that Lucas had sensed danger in the weeks before his passing. He had confided in people that he was afraid, but he never suspected the threat would come from those he considered friends. That's perhaps the most haunting aspect of this case. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional and psychological. Lucas trusted the wrong people, and that trust cost him his life. Today, Kian Williams and Kai Nelson Palmer remain in custody, serving their life sentences. Lucas Sutton's family continues to grieve, and the community of Croydon is left to process the reality that such violence can occur between people who once called each other friends. The case serves as a stark warning about the dangers of misplaced loyalty, petty grievances allowed to fester, and the irreversible consequences that follow when someone decides that betrayal justifies taking a life. Maxwell, Marion Morton. Every generation has its defining technology, and for teenagers in the 2010s, Snapchat represented something revolutionary. Photos that disappeared after seconds, messages that vanished without a trace. The illusion of privacy in a digital age. But what happens when someone uses that technology not to share a moment with friends, but to document something so disturbing that it becomes the very evidence that seals their fate? In February of 2015, a 16-year-old named Maxwell Marion Morton learned that nothing on the internet truly disappears, and that one selfie could change everything. Maxwell Morton and Ryan Mangan were both juniors at Jeanette High School in Pennsylvania. They lived in the same small town, attended the same classes, and shared the kind of friendship that forms naturally in tight-knit communities. On February 4th, 2015, Mangan visited Morton's home in Jeanette. The two were playing video games, an ordinary activity for teenagers on a weekday evening. But sometime during that visit, something went terribly wrong. A single shot rang out inside the Morton home. Ryan Mangan, 16 years old, was struck in the face. He slumped in a chair, fatally wounded. What happened next defies comprehension for most people. Instead of calling for help, instead of attempting to save his friend's life, Morton made a different choice. He pulled out his phone, opened Snapchat, and positioned himself next to Mangan's body. He smiled for the camera. The photo captured Morton's face in the foreground, and Mangan sitting behind him in the chair, the aftermath of the shooting clearly visible. Across the top of the image, as Snapchat automatically does, appeared the name Maxwell. Morton sent the photo to a teenager in another state, someone he knew through social media. The recipient opened the message and immediately recognized something was deeply wrong. The image showed someone clearly in distress, and Morton appeared to be smiling about it. Before the photo could disappear, according to Snapchat's design, the recipient took a screenshot, preserving the evidence. Then that teenager did something that would prove crucial to the investigation. They showed the photo to their mother. She looked at the image, understood its implications, and contacted authorities. That decision set in motion a chain of events that would bring Morton to justice. Police received the photo and examined it carefully. It depicted someone sitting in a chair with an injury to the face. It showed Morton taking the selfie, his face visible as he looked at the camera. And crucially, it had his name displayed across the top. Officers in Jeanette were notified and arrived at the Mangan home on Wednesday, where Ryan's mother had discovered her son's body. The investigation moved quickly. Authorities contacted Morton and requested to search his home. In the basement, they discovered a 9mm handgun. At the scene where Mangan was found, investigators had recovered a discharged 9mm casing. The pieces were falling into place. When confronted with the evidence, Morton confessed. He admitted to shooting Mangan. He was arrested and charged as an adult with first-degree homicide, criminal homicide, and illegal possession of a firearm by a minor. He was held without bail at the Westmoreland County Juvenile Detention Center. Westmoreland County District Attorney John Peck spoke to reporters about the case, noting that in his 30 years as a prosecutor, he had never encountered a situation where a suspect took a selfie with their victim. He described the photo as a key piece of evidence that led investigators directly to Morton. The case raised immediate questions. Why would someone document such an act and share it with others? What goes through the mind of a person who chooses to pose for a photo rather than call for help? And what does it say about our relationship with technology that someone's first instinct was to capture and share rather than to save a life? The trial took place in October of 2017, more than 2 years after the incident. Morton took the stand and maintained that the shooting was an accident. His defense attorney argued that the boys had been playing with the gun found in the home and that it discharged unintentionally. The attorney referred to both teenagers as kids who made terrible decisions while handling a dangerous weapon. District Attorney John Peck presented a different narrative to the jury. He told them not to deliberate based on emotion or what would help them sleep better at night, but to examine the evidence and apply it to the law. Dr. Cyril Wecht, a forensic pathologist, provided testimony that added another layer to the tragedy. He explained that Mangan could have survived the shooting if he had received medical care promptly. Instead of seeking help, Morton posed for a selfie with his dying friend and then left the house without calling emergency services. The jury deliberated on whether Morton was guilty of first-degree homicide, third-degree homicide, or involuntary manslaughter. They reached a verdict on October 5, 2017. Maxwell Morton was found guilty of third-degree homicide. He was returned to county prison to await sentencing. The case of Maxwell Morton became one of the first high-profile examples of social media directly leading to a conviction in a homicide case. The Snapchat selfie, intended to disappear within seconds, instead became permanent evidence that connected Morton to the incident. For Ryan Mangan's mother, no verdict could bring her son back or erase the image of discovering him in their home. For the teenager who received the Snapchat and their mother who reported it, they played a crucial role in ensuring accountability. And for everyone who followed the case, it served as a stark reminder that digital footprints are never truly temporary, and that the choices we make with technology can have permanent, life-altering consequences. Terrion Thomas. Digital applause can become deafening. With each like, each share, each comment from strangers across the world, an online personality grows. But what happens when the cameras stop recording? When the stage lights dim and the real person emerges from behind the filters and 15-second clips? For Terrion Thomas, the answer to that question would turn into one of the most discussed cases to emerge from social media's dark underbelly. Born on February 28, 2004, Terrion grew up in Newellton, Louisiana, a small town where everyone knew everyone. But small-town life wasn't enough for someone with big ambitions. By his late teens, Terrion had discovered TikTok, a platform where personality could translate into fame overnight. He created content under the name Mr. Prada, posting videos that ranged from comedy sketches to lifestyle content. His approach was simple and relatable, tapping into everyday moments that resonated with millions. By 2024, he had amassed more than 8 million followers across multiple accounts, with over 550 million likes. To the outside world, he was living the dream, a young creator who had turned internet fame into a full-time career. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. Some followers noticed subtle changes in Terrion's behavior over the months leading up to September 2024. He posted cryptic messages about loneliness. He announced that his name was no longer Prada. Videos appeared, showing him with a shaved head and eyebrows, a drastic departure from his usual appearance. Were these simply creative choices, or cries for help? The internet loves to speculate, but no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. William Nicholas Abraham had lived a very different life. Born in the 1950s, he spent decades serving others. He began his adult years as a Catholic priest before transitioning into the field of mental health therapy. By 2024, at 69 years old, Abraham had built a respected practice in Baton Rouge, specializing in counseling for the LGBTQ community. Those who knew him described him as gentle, compassionate, and devoted to helping people navigate their most difficult moments. He appeared on local television, offering advice and support to viewers struggling with their mental health. To his clients and colleagues, he represented safety and understanding. On Saturday, September 28, 2024, surveillance cameras captured Abraham arriving at an apartment complex on Mancuso Lane in Baton Rouge around 11 in the morning. He wore casual clothes and appeared calm as he walked toward the building. What he couldn't have known was that he would never leave that complex alive. Investigators later confirmed that Abraham entered Terrion Thomas's apartment that day. The nature of their relationship remains unclear even now. Authorities found no evidence suggesting Abraham had ever been Terrion's therapist, despite widespread online rumors claiming otherwise. What occurred inside that apartment has been described by law enforcement as violent and physical. Hours after Abraham arrived, witnesses observed something deeply unsettling. They saw Terrion struggling as he dragged a large object wrapped in a blue tarp down the apartment stairs. The object was heavy, requiring significant effort to move. Terrion loaded this burden into Abraham's vehicle, a 2018 black Lincoln MKZ. The witnesses had no way of knowing they were watching the disposal of a human body. The following morning, September 29th, a passerby traveling along Highway 51 near the village of Tangipahoa noticed something unusual on the roadside. A tarp lay in a ditch, its contents concealed. When authorities arrived and examined the scene, they discovered Abraham's body. He was wrapped in a gray comforter secured with dark duct tape. A dark towel covered his head. An autopsy would later reveal that he had been struck repeatedly with a blunt object, resulting in injuries to his head, neck, and shoulders. The attack had been severe enough to cause his passing. Sheriff Gerald Sticker of Tangipahoa Parish described the scene as indicative of extreme violence. Investigators moved quickly. They traced Abraham's last known movements and identified Terrion Thomas as a person of interest. Surveillance footage from an Academy Sports and Outdoors store in Juban Crossing showed someone matching Terrion's description on Sunday, September 29th. He appeared to be driving Abraham's Lincoln. The next day, Baton Rouge police attempted a traffic stop on the same vehicle along North Sherwood Forest Boulevard. The driver responded by backing into the marked police car before speeding away. The officer later identified Terrion from a photo lineup as the person behind the wheel. A search warrant executed at Terrion's apartment painted a disturbing picture. Officers discovered what they described as a significant amount of blood throughout the residence. Multiple sharp objects and weapons were found. Evidence suggested attempts had been made to clean the scene, with additional items discarded in a dumpster. The physical evidence told a story of what had transpired within those walls, a story that contradicted the carefully curated image Terrion had presented online. While investigators pieced together the timeline, Terrion was already in motion. He fled Louisiana, crossing state lines into Texas. On October 1st, 2024, Dallas police arrested him. He was initially charged with second-degree homicide and obstruction of justice by the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office. Additional charges from Baton Rouge police included aggravated criminal damage to property, resisting an officer, and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. However, the legal situation evolved. Under Louisiana law, certain circumstances elevate a homicide charge to first degree. One such circumstance involves victims over the age of 65. Because Abraham was 69, prosecutors upgraded the charge. On January 16, 2025, a grand jury formally indicted Terrion on first-degree homicide, along with obstruction of justice, aggravated criminal damage to property, and unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. The upgrade carried profound implications. First-degree homicide in Louisiana opens the door to capital punishment. Throughout multiple court appearances, Terrion has been denied bond. Judges cited both the severity of the charges and his flight to another state as evidence that he posed a flight risk. He entered a not guilty plea during his arraignment on January 28, 2025. A competency hearing has been scheduled to determine whether he is mentally fit to stand trial. If ultimately found competent and convicted, he could face execution. The case has sparked intense debate across social media. Many of Terrion's followers expressed shock and disbelief. How could someone who entertained millions be capable of such actions? Others pointed to the warning signs, the changes in behavior, the troubling posts. The internet became a courtroom of public opinion, with theories and accusations flying in every direction. Some posts falsely claimed that Terrion had been connected to accusations from Abraham's past. In 2015, Abraham had faced an allegation involving an 11-year-old client, though prosecutors declined to pursue the case. Authorities and Abraham's former attorney firmly stated that Terrion was not involved in that situation and was not a client. As of today, Terrion Thomas remains in the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison without bond. No trial date has been set. The motive behind Abraham's passing continues to elude investigators. What drove a 20-year-old social media star to allegedly take the life of a 69-year-old therapist? Was it a dispute that escalated beyond control, a darker plan that went awry? The answers may only emerge during trial proceedings. Jared Ambeau, Abraham's attorney, expressed profound grief over his client's fate, describing him as someone with a servant's heart who dedicated his life to helping others navigate their pain. That such a person would meet such an end has left the Baton Rouge community reeling. The The story of Terry and Thomas serves as a stark reminder that online personas often mask complex realities. Behind the filters, the edited videos, and the carefully crafted content, real people exist with real struggles. And sometimes, those struggles manifest in ways that shatter lives and communities. Whether justice will ultimately be served remains to be seen. For now, the world watches and waits for answers that may never fully explain how fame, loneliness, and violence converged on one terrible September day in Louisiana. Zachary Latham. Fame comes in many forms these days. Some people earn it through talent, dedication, or years of hard work. Others stumble into it through luck or circumstance. But what happens when someone becomes so consumed by the pursuit of online attention that they lose sight of everything else? For 18-year-old Zachary Latham, the answer to that question would turn a quiet neighborhood dispute into a national conversation about the dangerous intersection of social media and real-world consequences. Zachary Latham moved to Vineland, New Jersey, in 2018 when he was just 16 years old. He came to live with his grandparents in a working-class neighborhood where families had known each other for years. The area was quiet, the kind of place where people waved to neighbors and kids rode bikes down the street without worry. Shortly after turning 18, Latham enlisted in the New Jersey National Guard, though his military service would be brief. He separated from the Guard in 2020 under circumstances that were never fully explained to the public. By then, Latham had already discovered something that seemed to captivate him more than anything else: TikTok. On the surface, there was nothing unusual about a teenager posting videos online. Millions of people did the same thing every day. Latham shared content featuring expensive sports cars he owned, revving engines and showing off vehicles that seemed out of place in the modest neighborhood. To his followers, he was just another young creator building an audience. He gained approximately 40,000 followers, which was respectable but far from the viral fame so many TikTok users chased. What made Latham different was what he was willing to do to get more attention. The Durham family lived just a few houses away. William Durham Sr., known as Timmy to those close to him, was 51 years old and had worked as a corrections officer at Southwood State Prison for 19 years. He was married to Catherine Durham, and together they had two sons, 21-year-old William Jr., called Billy by the family, and 17-year-old Gage. The Durhams were the kind of family that looked out for their neighborhood. They noticed when things weren't right, and they weren't afraid to speak up about it. The trouble began in April 2020, when Catherine Durham confronted Latham about his driving. He had been speeding through the residential streets, treating the quiet neighborhood like his personal racetrack. Catherine approached him and asked him to slow down. It was a reasonable request from a concerned neighbor, but Latham didn't respond the way most people would. He pulled out his phone and started recording. In the video that would later be viewed more than 3 million times, Latham mocked Catherine, repeatedly calling her Karen, a term that had become popular online to describe someone perceived as entitled or demanding. He filmed from inside one of his sports cars, taunting her even as police vehicles arrived in response to complaints about his loud exhaust and reckless behavior. What should have been a simple neighborly disagreement became content. Latham posted the video to TikTok, and it went viral almost overnight. His follower count grew. Comments flooded in, with some users encouraging him to escalate things further. Suggestions ranged from egging the Durham house to slashing tires. Some told him to go after the family. Latham seemed to embrace the attention. Days later, he drove past the Durham home and shouted at Catherine through his window, "Hey Karen, we went viral." The situation spiraled from there. Billy Durham confronted Latham in another incident that was also filmed and posted online. The caption read, "Karen's son found out the video went viral and tried taking me out of the car. Blow this up for part 3. That video received over 159,000 views. Each interaction became fodder for Latham's growing audience, and each post seemed designed to provoke a stronger reaction from the Durham family. In one video that was later deleted, Latham allegedly held a firearm with text that read, "This is how you handle neighbors." The Durham family tried to get help. They contacted the Vineland Police Department multiple times, reporting harassment and expressing concern about Latham's behavior. But they hit a wall. Courts were closed because of the ongoing situation with restrictions during 2020, and officers told them they couldn't file a formal complaint right away. Catherine Durham spoke with Vineland Acting Police Chief Pedro Cassiano, who indicated he would discuss potential cyber harassment charges with the prosecutor's office. The family never received an update. Meanwhile, Latham continued posting, and the tension between the two households continued to build. On May 4th, 2020, everything came to a head. According to the Durham family, Latham swerved his truck towards 17-year-old Gage as the teenager rode his bicycle. Latham later claimed he only honked his horn and did not swerve, but the family believed their son had been deliberately targeted. Catherine Durham followed Latham and confronted him, recording the exchange on her phone. Video footage shows Latham appearing to swat her hand away before driving toward his house. The Durham family followed. When they arrived at the Latham property, Sarah Latham, Zachary's wife, was already recording on her phone. She can be heard telling the Durham family, "I promise you, you better back up because you're not gonna like what's coming out." Both she and Zachary repeatedly told the Durhams to get off their property, but the family, believing their teenage son had been endangered, did not leave. William Durham Sr. had come to protect his family and address what he saw as ongoing harassment. The confrontation quickly became physical. Zachary Latham emerged armed with a stun gun and a knife. The footage captured by Sarah shows the Durham men approaching as Zachary backed toward his garage. The sound of the stun gun can be heard discharging. Voices overlap as both sides yell. The scene devolved into chaos as the three Durham men and Latham engaged in a physical struggle that moved from the driveway into the garage. During the fight, Latham used the knife he was carrying. He struck William Durham Sr. multiple times. One wound went under the victim's armpit, puncturing his lung. When emergency responders arrived, they found significant amounts of blood throughout the scene. William Durham Sr. was rushed to a hospital, but his injuries were too severe. He passed away, leaving behind a wife and two sons who had only wanted to protect their family from what they saw as escalating threats. Zachary Latham called authorities himself. In a recording obtained by New Jersey Advance Media, he can be heard telling the emergency dispatcher, "There's blood all over the place." He was arrested and charged with aggravated manslaughter, aggravated assault, and weapons offenses. Catherine Durham and her sons were also charged with simple assault, criminal trespass, and aggravated assault, respectively, for their roles in entering the Latham property and engaging in the confrontation. The charges against Catherine were later dismissed. Her sons' cases proceeded separately. The Durham family's attorneys argued that Latham had deliberately lured the family into the confrontation with the specific intention of recording it for TikTok. They pointed to Sarah Latham's decision to film the encounter and the couple's documented pattern of posting neighborhood disputes online. In a letter to prosecutors, the attorneys stated that it was the couple's intent to post these videos to TikTok and become TikTok famous. They argued that if Latham had truly feared for his safety or his wife's safety, he could have retreated into his house, locked the doors, and called police. Instead, he armed himself and met the family outside, escalating the situation. Latham's defense team presented a different narrative. Public defender Nathan Perry argued that the Durhams were the aggressors, that they had trespassed onto Latham's property, and that Zachary had every right to defend himself and his home. Perry noted that the three Durham men collectively outweighed Latham by more than 300 pounds, and that they had come to his property looking for a fight. They brought the fight to him, Perry told the court. He described the Durham family's actions as a mission to get at Latham and argued that his client had no duty to retreat from people entering his property. Perry acknowledged the tragedy, but stated that the Durhams visited this great sadness upon themselves. The case went to trial in April 2023, nearly 3 years after William Durham Sr.'s passing. The courtroom heard testimony from family members, watched the videos that had been posted online, and reviewed the footage of the confrontation itself. Medical testimony revealed that Durham had only half a cup of blood remaining in his body due to the severity of his injuries. On the witness stand, Gage Durham described seeing his father pale and covered in blood. The emotional weight of the case was evident to everyone present. On the 7th day of trial, after hearing closing arguments from both sides, the jury began their deliberations. When they returned with a verdict, they found Zachary Latham not guilty of manslaughter. The jury accepted the self-defense argument, concluding that while Latham had taken a life, he had done so while defending his property from people who had entered it with hostile intent. The decision devastated the Durham family and sparked intense debate. How could someone who had documented a pattern of provocation and harassment be found innocent? How did posting videos online factor into whether someone acted in self-defense? Following his acquittal, Latham moved to Florida, but his behavior did not change. While living in Naples, he was arrested again, this time for allegedly displaying a weapon at another driver and attempting to ram their vehicle. The pattern that had been so evident in New Jersey seemed to follow him across state lines. As of today, the outcome of that Florida case remains unclear. The story of Zachary Latham raises questions that extend far beyond one neighborhood in Vineland, New Jersey. It forces us to consider what happens when the pursuit of online fame collides with real-world disputes. It asks us to examine where the line falls between self-defense and provocation. And it leaves us wondering whether justice was truly served when a 19-year veteran corrections officer and father of 2 lost his life, and the person who took it walked free.